It's the early evening in the Russia's Irkutsk region on June 1st, 2025. The driver of one of the container trucks receives a phone call. The cargo owners ask him to pull over at the nearby gas station. The driver follows the instructions precisely, but as soon as he stops, he is deafened by the loud noise. Surprised, he sees how the container roof falls near the truck, and a second later, a distinct buzzing fills the air. The Ukrainian Spider Web operation has just begun. The truck is parked just 7 kilometers from Russian Belaya air base and currently acts as a drone carrier with multiple deadly UAVs taking off from it. What's striking is that the entire above-mentioned chain of events was initiated from the 4,500 kilometers away by agents of the Ukrainian Security Service. What's even more surprising is that the drones also begin taking off from similar container trucks near Olenya air base in the Murmansk region, around 4,000 kilometers from Belaya. Soon, similar reports of drones and explosions arrived from Ivanovo, Dyagilevo and Ukrainka air bases, meaning Ukraine has just executed the largest simultaneous attack on the adversary's nuclear-capable strategic aviation in history. The key phase of the operation, which was prepared for a year and a half, takes less than an hour. The drones, facing no kinetic defenses and likely no electronic ones, in the first minutes begin methodically striking predetermined points of predetermined aircraft using an unknown combination of manual control, dead reckoning algorithms, and AI for target recognition. At Olenya Air Base, the drones prioritize 4 Tu-95 strategic bombers parked in the open at the center of the base. These planes are undoubtedly among the most used in strikes against Ukraine. 3 of them were recently upgraded to the Tu-95 MSM version and carry personal names. Multiple drones strike each aircraft, causing catastrophic explosions of fuel tanks, as Ukrainian operators target the most vulnerable parts of the aircraft. The varied flight paths also suggests that different levels of flight assistance were used to bypass electronic warfare systems. In total, Ukraine completely destroys a Tu-95 MS, nicknamed Chelyabinsk, from the 43rd Combat Training and Flight Personnel Conversion Center, as well as 2 Tu-95 MSMs, Izborsk and Voronezh, from the 184th Heavy Bomber Aviation Regiment. Another Tu-95 is also destroyed, but cannot be positively identified due to limited footage. Right next to them, one N-12BK military transport plane is likely used to dispose drones after targets here were gone, so it was also burned to ashes. This loss should not be underestimated, as this plane was likely used to transport cruise missiles from the factory plant to the bombers. A similar situation happens on Belaya Air Base, 4,000 kilometers from Olenya. Drones strike and completely destroy 3 Tu-95 planes of the 184th Heavy Bomber Aviation Regiment parked next to each other, one of which is identified as an upgraded Tu-95 MSM nicknamed Kozelsk. Unlike at Olenya, Ukrainian drones also target Russian Tu-22M3 supersonic bombers, likely all from the 200th Heavy Bomber Aviation Regiment. These aircraft are located in the southern section of the base and surrounded by earthen berms for protection. However, since the drones attack from above, this offers no defense. Ukrainians destroy 4 of these and heavily damage the 5th by striking the cockpit, likely rendering it inoperable. A similar incident happens with another Tu-95 in the northern part of the base. After the strike, the plane was likely towed away, so at least it did not lose its structural integrity, but damage can be seen even on satellite images. What's interesting is that Russians, in a few days, placed an intact Tu-95 MS right on the same spot, likely to cover up the loss, but it was already recorded on earlier images. On Ivanovo Air Base, Ukrainian drones strike radars of 2 Russian A-50 AVAX planes, dealing minor damage to the aircraft themselves, but likely making them useless, even with the smallest damage to the radar. These planes were clearly decommissioned and in the best case scenario used for spare parts, therefore this loss is rather not critical for Russians. At Dyagilevo and Ukrainka air bases, operatives appear to face challenges in execution. At Dyagilevo, despite multiple drones being used, only one Tu-22M appears damaged in the footage. At Ukrainka, the truck carrying the drones failed to reach its destination and self-destructed. It's worth noting that due to delays in resolution limits of satellite images and Russian attempts to conceal the damage, it's possible that more planes were hit, especially at Dyagilevo. However, we only count cases when it's possible to identify specific damage on a specific plane and ignore many speculations. So, to sum things up, as of the time of the recording of this video, there is evidence of 7 Tu-95s, 4 Tu-22Ms, and one N-12BK destroyed, as well as one Tu-95, two Tu-22Ms, and two decommissioned A-50s damaged. Official Ukrainian and obviously the high-end estimate of the targeted planes reaches as high as 41, which is possible, but the open source intelligence does not support it as of now. What is definitely impossible is that Russian official estimate of no destroyed planes, and some lightly damaged ones so that they can be repaired in a short time. Even the claim that Russia can easily repair first and foremost damaged bombers is in itself absurd. To prove this, we have to start with an estimate of the Russian strategic aviation size. At most, 57 Tu-22Ms, 58 Tu-95s, and 16 Tu-160s. This seems like a lot, making Russia the country with the second largest strategic bomber fleet in the world. However, as usual, this is only on surface. If we dig deeper, we quickly find that both Tu-22Ms and Tu-95s, as well as spare parts for them, have not been produced for over 30 years. As a result, Russia has to constantly cannibalize on a portion of its fleet to keep the remaining aircraft in the air. For example, in 2015, Russia began installing minor electronic upgrades on Tu-95s, completing only 26 of them. In addition, since 2013, only 27 Tu-95 MSs have been modernized to the Tu-95 MSM version, which again suggests that the number of fully operational aircraft with extended service life is somewhere around 30, or approximately half of the total. We also estimate that roughly the same number of Tu-22Ms are operational, since in 2013 there were plans to upgrade 30 of them to the Tu-22 M3M version. For planes that were not produced since early 90s, these upgrades and service life extensions are vital, so in our opinion, the number of them gives a good estimate of the battle-capable portion of the strategic bomber fleet. Unlike the previously mentioned aircraft, Tu-160s are actually still in production, kind of, because the production has been halted and was renewed only in 2015 using old and half-assembled airframes, along with modernization of existing bombers. In short, 10 new aircraft were ordered to be completed by 2027, but by 2023 only 2 has been built and 2 modernized, that is in 8 years. In addition to that, out of all 16 Tu-160s, 13 went through repairs and service life extensions from 2008 to 2017, which also hints that the remaining 3 might be also used for cannibalization due to production delays. With this data, we can conclude that the Russian Air Force has taken significant losses, approximately 20% of its battle-ready strategic bombers, and will not be able to replace them in the foreseeable future. At the same time, for the current war, Russia still has enough aircraft to launch cruise missiles against Ukrainian targets, as it has been doing for the last 3 years, with at best questionable effectiveness. Exactly for such mission, on May 31st, a large fraction of the Russian strategic aviation was concentrated, first and foremost on Belaya and Olenya air bases. The question remains why Ukrainians heavily focused on rather outdated Tu-22Ms and Tu-95s and apparently ignored at least 7 Tu-160s parked at Belaya air base during the attack. After all, these much more modern bombers combine the payload of turboprop Tu-95s and speed of supersonic Tu-22Ms. Judging by the amount of preparations, it seems like a deliberate choice, since Tu-160s were used much less in the cruise missile attacks. The reasons are the overall complexity of the plane preparation for a mission, as well as a very limited engine life cycle that does not go beyond 2600 flight hours. This is just half of what Tu-95s have. Thus, Ukrainians made a hard choice to attack less sophisticated but much more dangerous enemy assets. Now, let's talk about planning and execution. The Ukrainian Security Service, or SBU, under its chief Vasyl Malyuk, began working on the operation 18 months before the strikes. Preparation was directly supervised by President Volodymyr Zelensky, and the operation was kept in secret, even from Ukraine's closest international partners. The secrecy was crucial since SBU agents first infiltrated Russia, set up a covered base in Chelyabinsk, and smuggled in 150 disassembled Ukrainian OSA FPV quadcopters with 3.2 kg warheads, along with wooden mobile cabins across the border, likely with Kazakhstan. Then, the drones were assembled, hidden under remotely removable roofs inside the cabins, and delivered to warehouses. Once the Ukrainian intelligence confirmed that Russia was loading planes with missiles and fuel for major strike, the operation began. Ukrainian agents, by then already out of Russia, ordered cabins to be delivered to locations near Russian bases. Resembling the spider's web, the trucks made multi-day journeys across Russia, reaching every destination except Ukrainka by June 1st. This allowed the SBU to launch the coordinated strike on 4 Russian airfields at once. The drones themselves were also with a twist. Ukrainians used the open-source Ardupilot software, which supports the reckoning navigation, helping bypass Russian electronic warfare. In addition, each drone likely had a Russian SIM card, allowing optimal control via mobile internet. This provided a manageable delay in control over long distances, along with high-resolution video feeds. Out of the 150 drones, around 117 were reportedly used. None were intercepted, although many likely missed the targets due to signal loss or control delays. Now, the question arises, why were the bombers so vulnerable to the attack? First of all, the Russians, as usual, deeply underestimated their adversary, deciding that the airfields located thousands of kilometers away would be unreachable by any Ukrainian weapons. This is why the whole cycle of bomber rearmament, refueling and storage was organized in the open areas of the Russian air bases. Russia was also not forced to do that by the New START treaty with the US. The treaty never prohibited parties from storing strategic aircraft inside hangars. It was just always cheaper and more convenient. In addition to that, Russia actually pulled out of the New START after the beginning of war with Ukraine, so every wrong decision that made June 1st the Black Day of the Russian aviation came only from the Russian higher military command. What could have saved the Russian bombers were concrete hangars, but despite the Russian Ministry of Defense announcing the construction in 2021, not even a single shelter was built. Instead, after the first Ukrainian strikes on airfields, someone in the Russian General Staff insisted that the planes have to be thoroughly covered with car tires, sandbags, and sometimes even sections of metal fence. The videos we showed demonstrated to the fullest extent the effectiveness of these measures. Moreover, we would argue that placing and removing tires would actually waste critical time during which a plane must take off if the airbase is under attack. And finally, the Russians also attempted to fool Ukrainian intelligence by drawing images of various aircraft, including bombers, on the concrete. To sum things up, all Russian measures to protect their strategic bomber fleet were simply an elaborate imitation of work, rather than the real measures that could have prevented the disaster. Responsibility also lies with Russia's internal security service, the FSB, which failed to prevent the operation of their Ukrainian counterparts. It's also fascinating that the warehouse where SBU agents were working, likely for months, were located just 10 minutes from the border department of the FSB of the Russian Federation for Chelyabinsk region. In conclusion, Operation Spider Web will be remembered as one of the most, if not the most, ingenious special operations ever conducted behind enemy lines. By inflicting permanent damage on both the Russian Air Force and its nuclear strike capability, the Ukrainian Security Service showcased a level of precision, secrecy and strategic foresight that few intelligence agencies in the world could hope to match. Here we can only repeat the phrase with which we ended our video about the first major operation of the Security Service of Ukraine, the attack on the Crimean Bridge with a truck bomb. Operation Spider Web is another striking example of the Russian incompetence in protecting itself and a success for Ukraine, which persistently takes the necessary steps to restore its territorial integrity.